on that just a little bit. Okay, let's get started. Ready? Now, an introduction, understanding creative financing strategies. You know, just think of it this way. Whatever you can do to help the seller sell on terms is what we get involved with, okay? And terms means, not for cash. And what are the money sources that real estate investors work with? Well, we work with private lenders. We also work with joint venture partners. And we also work with creative contracts. A lease with an option or rent-to-own is very popular. Contract for deed when you're purchasing is very popular in Georgia. Also, wraparound mortgages sometimes is a very valuable tool. And private first mortgages, they're very, very popular. Subject to existing financing, or sub 2, I think is going to be one of the strongest ways to use creative financing techniques in this Dodd-Frank era. All right, the truth of no money down. Can you buy a property no money down? Yes, you can. You can do that. You can buy it on subject to existing financing and take over the payments. You can buy it on contract for deed with very little money down or no money down. You can buy it on a wrap with no money down. You can buy it on a private first mortgage, owner financing with no money down. Now, the big thing here is what are no financing strategies versus existing financing strategies, and what are new financing strategies? Well, no financing at all that's like a straight option. You don't need any money whatsoever. You could do a lease option assignment. That's no financing whatsoever. That kind of thing. Existing financing, we basically look at what is the existing financing. And when you do a lease with an option, for instance, you have to look at what kind of loan is on there. Is it a fixed or an ARM? If it's an ARM, you don't want to assign that deal to the tenant buyer on a lease option assignment because they're going to take that existing financing and it's not going to be great. If it's a fixed rate mortgage, it's much better. So I always like to get fixed rate mortgages when I'm doing a lease option assignment. Now, new financing. New financing has to do with you have to bring in new financing. So you might buy an apartment building and bring in new commercial financing. Or you could buy a house on an FHA loan. That would be new financing. Or you could use private lenders, and that would be new financing. Or joint venture partners, that would be new financing. So what strategies do you use? It sounds like too much to, comprehend, but to tell you the truth, it has a lot to do with your existing situation, how much time you have, how much credit you have, things of that nature. So what's a creative home buying strategy? Getting creative and finding a motivated seller, finding flexible bank loans like FHA loans and commercial and so forth. Wells Fargo is keeping loans in-house for like 5% down with reasonable credit. Doesn't have to be perfect, but reasonable credit. So that should be looking at also a rent-to-own kind of arrangement. But make sure you get good advice on getting that mortgage. You want a good chance to get that mortgage, not a bad chance. And if you have problems with your credit, we have credit improvement specialists that we use on a national basis to help increase FICO scores, and we can generally get 100 points within 6 to 12 months. Please contact me if you're interested in if you have a problem with your credit rating. Short sales. Well, I really discourage a newbie to get involved with short sales, and they're taking longer and longer. It's not a good idea or a bad idea. It does hurt the seller's credit. It does have a tax ramification if you do a short sale. The IRS might send you a 1099 at the end of the year. Do you need credit or cash to do short sale? No. No, you don't. What kind of properties? Highly recommend pretty houses in nice neighborhoods. Please do that. Don't get junky properties. How much do you offer? Well, that's got to do with a BPO, and we won't go into that in this introduction, but short sales are not for the newbie. Now, when you sell financing strategies, when you flip, what are you going to do? You're going to sell to an FHA buyer? Probably. You need to get cashed out when you flip. When you rehab, yeah, you need to flip to a retail buyer. When you lease option, if I'm leasing with an option from a seller, I'm going to assign that deal, and we use a creative way to do lease option assignments. We actually don't assign the deal. We do an option release where we're going to lease with an option from the seller. Then we're going to, not assign, but we're going to sell our interest in that option agreement that's actually clouded the title. And they're going to pay us an option release fee instead of an assignment fee. And what not to do. Well, here's the big thing about when selling. You don't want to sell on terms other than a lease and a pure option with the Dodd-Frank, because if you use rent credits applying towards the purchase price, it might be construed as a financing arrangement. I'm going to repeat that. In the Dodd-Frank arena, what not to do. Don't sell on a rent-to-own where you have rent credits. Please don't do that. The other thing is, when you sell on rent-to-own, very important, send the buyer, the tenant buyer, before they move in, through an RMLO. That stands for Registered Loan Originator, Mortgage Loan Originator. It's so important with the Dodd-Frank Act because the whole thing here is about the ability to repay. And if you don't prove that with the 8 points in the Dodd-Frank, you might really get in trouble. Maybe not you, but the seller. So if I'm lease optioning from the seller, and that seller understands that I'm selling my agreement as per my letter of intent, and if you want that letter of intent for lease option, please just notify me. The bottom line here is you need to protect the seller. And how we protect the seller is we send the buyer through an RMLO. That way, according to Dodd-Frank, if they approve that on that basis, or at least write a letter on their letterhead saying that their debt to earnings needs to be decreased by a couple of points but everything else is fine, they should be able to get the loan as per their credit rating or whatever. They're going to give an opinion, like a doctor gives an opinion. If you get that letter and put it on the file, you are going to do, and please, this is not legal advice. And we haven't had, Dodd-Frank just started on Friday the 10th of January. But my strong recommendation is you put every buyer, if they're owner-occupant, send them to an RMLO and get a letter from the RMLO on your letterhead and put that in the file and give a copy to the seller that you're lease option assigning to. All right, let's get through the next one. You ready? I know it's probably confusing a little bit, but RMLO is the key. How to make money on no equity properties. This is where I think the opportunity is for newbies right now. You do a subject to deal and then you either rent it out or you do a rent-to-own arrangement on an exit strategy. You can buy on contract for deed. See, Dodd-Frank doesn't matter. You can buy on contract for deed in Georgia and then assign the, lease option the deal. You could do a short sale on no equity properties, but I highly recommend you stick with subject to and lease option assignments and buying on contract or deed in Georgia. If you do those things, you should be in good shape as far as buying on creative terms. Now, it says here how to get cash back at closing. You know, we used to be able to create a note and sell the note at the closing table. We can't really do that anymore. That's called simultaneous financing. But there's all sorts of ways to get cash back at closing. It's a little bit of an advanced technique. I won't touch base on it right now. Now, financing sources. Where can you get financing? Well, you can look at the seller. Simultaneous financing, like I said, we don't usually do that anymore, where we create the note and sell it at the closing table. But, you know, if we do owner financing deal and we get a large down payment and we do underwrite the buyer through, because it's Dodd-Frank, we might be able to do a partial. And a partial is where you sell the front end of the note. And future discounting, you can always ask for a discount down the road. And that's about the note business. And there is some Dodd-Frank issues with the note frank, and I won't get into that, but I just want to touch base on simultaneous financing and selling the front end of the note. Now, financing sources, banks, conventional financing for investors and for buyers. You know, banks, I try to avoid banks. I really do. I'd rather use private lenders or joint venture partners. But you should know, go down to your small bank. I mean a small bank, not the big banks, but a small bank, and tell them, I'd like to bring a deal to you, and I'd like you to give me a loan of 80% of appraisal, or 20%. You know, and I might be buying this thing on terms. I might be buying it on a contract for deed. Would you give me, if I bought the property and I owned it, would you refinance it and give me 80 cents on the dollar for it? And that's a very, very strong possibility with banks needing to be able to write mortgages. For investors, banks for investors, well, you need hard money lenders for your wholesale flips. So you need to take a look at what banks or hard money lenders will be able to get funding for your cash investors if you're wholesale flipping. And for your buyers, you need to really understand FHA financing. So that is something that I would put on my to-do list. I need to understand FHA financing, the basics. Now for newbies, mortgage brokers, what's customary, what are junk fees, pre-qualifying buyers, I would use a 1003 app, which is a mortgage application. I would get pre-qualified myself, and then I would use loan pre-approval versus loan final approval. They're two different things. You can get basically, this is what we're probably going to do, and loan final approval is, well, we had to change a few things. And, you know, it's never easy dealing with banks in general. Financing sources, hard money mortgage brokers. You know, you need to know the terminology, what's a one-year call, what is interest only, things of that nature. And I would just go, one of the best places to learn about hard money is to go to biggerpockets.com. Biggerpockets.com has an amazing teaching about hard money and getting money for repairs and doing draws and things of that nature, and what are the credit requirements for hard money. And also, what documents do you need if you're getting hard money? And getting your wholesale buyers financed, so important. Hard money private lenders. Now, private lenders are not partners. What's the difference? Well, if I've got a $100,000 property and I can get it on 90 cents on the dollar, a private lender will give me all of that 90 cents on the dollar. They might even lend me a little bit more to paint it and get some carpet, maybe 95 cents on the dollar. And then I will give them basically a private loan payment. And generally, private lenders use IRAs. And we teach you about IRAs and going through a custodian. But they're not partners. What's a JV partner? JV partner is like a doctor. And a doctor I just say to the doctor, says, Doc, if you got a couple $100,000 liquid somewhere and you want to put it to work on the street, I'll help you. I'm going to go find, let's say, a $100,000 property, needs $20,000 in work, and I can go buy it at 60 cents on the dollar. So I go buy it at 60 cents on the dollar, I put $20,000 in work, and I resell it, and we make $15,000 profit after we pay the agent. Well, we split that 50-50. You make $7,500 by putting that money to work, and you get it in 3 months. What's the rate of return for you, Doc? Probably, I don't know, 15%? How would you like to get 15% every 3 months? Wouldn't that be great? So that's kind of like a JV partner deal. Partners versus lenders, you want a lot of partners and a lot of private lenders. You want multiple private lenders. You want the money to keep recirculating. You want finding private lenders, marketing for those. One of the best ways is, here's a secret, finding private lenders. You want to be able to go to the real estate records, wherever your private county records are, and do a search for custodian names. Do a search for custodian names. What's a custodian? What's an example? Well, Trust ETC, Equity Trust, is my favorite. If you need a list of custodians, please get in touch with me. But that's one of the fastest ways to find existing private lenders. Do a search on public record. Because generally, if they've already done a private loan, they wouldn't mind doing another one. Okay. JV partners. When not to partner with somebody and determining to partner or to borrow. Well, you know what? If I have a partner who's really a pain in the ass, I'm sorry to use that kind of language, but if they're a pain in the ass, I don't want to work with them. I don't want big fights. So I would rather say, no, I don't think it's a good fit. Thank you very much. So it's a personal thing. Using IRAs, this is one of the most exciting ways to be able to get private funds so you don't have to worry about going to banks. Either your IRA or somebody else's IRA, a TPA, third-party administrator, a custodian, they're all the same thing. Self-directing your IRA, you do not need money in your IRA to buy real estate. You can borrow the money. Growing your IRA without making contributions, allowable investments. This is all the best way to learn about using IRAs in real estate is to buy a book. Now the book is called IRA Wealth by Patrick Rice. And Patrick Rice in the 90s, a long time ago, he was a very famous teacher of IRAs in real estate in Pensco Trust in Florida. So I always recommend that book. Choosing the right custodian, I always say Pensco Trust or go into Equity Trust. Those are my two favorites. Borrowing or lending money in an IRA, you can be a private lender in an IRA. And you can also borrow money, and the IRA will borrow money. It has to be non-recourse, and we need to teach you a little bit about that. Buying property in an IRA, you can do that. Buying discounted notes, you can do that. You can wholesale property. The IRA is an entity like an LLC or a corporation. So you can wholesale property, and the IRA is going to be the purchaser when he buys the property and when he sells the property. Rehabbing properties in an IRA, you can do that. Lease option assignment or sandwich lease options in an IRA, you can do that. Now, using IRAs, you can buy a rental property in your IRA. If you had $100,000, you want to go buy a 4-bedroom house and rent it out. You just have the IRA buy it. Now, when not to buy property in your IRA and opening up an IRA, we help you understand that. There are some pitfalls to it. Now, credit cards as a source of financing, supplementing your other financing sources, bank credit cards, home improvement credit cards, equity lines of credit, signature loans, co-signers, all sorts of ways for financing sources. Now, credit repair is very important. We use a specialist in Texas for credit repair. There's a 3-legged stool to credit repair. The first leg is to get rid of negative marks. The second leg is to negotiate with existing debt. And it's very important to do that right, because if you negotiate with them and say, look, I owe you $1,000, would you take $200? And they say, yes, but I need you to take the mark off at the same time. They will do that if you have a third-party negotiator. If you try to do it yourself, it's very hard to do that. And the third leg is basically creating brand new positive marks. And let me give you a tip. One of the two fastest ways is to do an installment loan with like $1,000 into a savings account or a CD and go to the bank manager and say, look, I had some problems with my health and I got some medical bills on my credit report. I want to repair my credit by getting an installment loan with your bank. Would you help me with that? Would you report the positive history? Give them the $1,000. They'll give you the $1,000 back as a secured loan, and then you make payments, double payments, not 12 monthly payments, but you make 2 every month. So if you divide, 12 into the $1,000, that might be $80 a month that you pay them, and interest. So you make 2 payments, 80 and 80, $160 a month. And in 6 months, you're going to have a paid as agreed, open installment loan, paid as agreed, and then successfully paid off. That's going to boost your credit faster than anything. That's the first tip. Second tip, how can you improve your credit? Well, let me tell you something. This is what you can do. You can get a secured credit card. You might have to put $400, $500 into a savings account, but make sure that they report positive history. So you'll get a Visa card that's tied to a checking account or to a savings account, and you can't go over that amount. Then that's step one. Get the secured Visa or MasterCard. Then go to like JCPenney. It was one of my favorites. You go up there. You go up to the 3rd floor. You go up to the credit department. And you say, look, I'm trying to build a credit rating. Can you give me a JCPenney card? They'll give you one on the spot. It won't be very much. It'll be about $100 or $200, and it's a paper one. They don't even give you the real one. And then you go down and go buy something very inexpensive for like $20 and then go back up to them and say, look, I'm going out of town and I won't be able to get my statements. Can I pay this off in full right now? So what that does is you take your JCPenney card, you buy something, you pay it off in full, and on the credit report it's going to say open new account, charge, and paid in full. That's going to help build your FICO score. So those are 2 tips about building a credit rating faster. So what we went over today is a lot of different things, didn't we? But if you're a new real estate investor, I highly recommend you start off with subject to and lease option assignments. If you do that, you will probably do better than if you start off with wholesaling or rehabbing, even if you're a good carpenter or a good rehab construction person. Why? Why do I feel that that is better for newbies? Well, I'll tell you why. Wholesaling takes a lot of moving parts, and you have to be able to find exactly what the cash investor wants to find. If you can't find that exact thing for the investor buyer once you get the property tied up, you may not be able to flip it. So your buyer pool who's going to buy the property from you is very specific and sometimes fickle. You know, sometimes they drag their feet, okay? And they have to be able to buy it quickly. So that's the problem with wholesaling. And wholesaling doesn't work well in every area. But finding no equity properties for subject to and finding no equity properties for lease option assignments, I believe, is easier. This is my opinion. If you want free information on how to get a quick start in real estate investing, please go to reiskills.com. All right, Kurt, I want to thank you for this invitation to put this video together. You have a super day, and best of luck with Dodd-Frank. Just remember about Dodd-Frank, one last point. It's investor to investor. Dodd-Frank doesn't apply. So if you go talk to a real estate investor and he's selling his landlord rental to you, you don't have to worry about it. Okay? And also, if a seller is selling on lease option or on terms to you, like a contract for deed or something along those lines, he can do one of those. He can do one of those, and there's an exception. Okay? There's an exception to the Dodd-Frank. And we have Dodd-Frank videos on our site. So go to reiskills.com.